Hello, and for anyone that's listened to the previous recordings, welcome back. For anyone that hasn't, obviously welcome for the first time. This is the Junior Developer Link pod. I'm Chris. I co-founded the Developer Link, which is a software engineering specific recruitment company back in 2020 with my business partner Mike, and we launched this group called the Junior Developer Link pretty much the exact same time. Reason behind that was we kind of found as recruiters we didn't really have a lot of vacancies for entry level developers because of kind of the nature of the market, a lot of people out there, but we did have the network to be able to find people that could really support them in their job search. So we did a lot of sort of like virtual talks and virtual meetups, and a lot of the feedback was can't make it to the talk, or like do you have the recording and everything like that. So we decided to push it to kind of offline and more sort of bite-sized useful chunks that people can listen in sort of podcast form. So lots of exciting ones coming up, but today we've got David Roberts, who's going to be talking a little bit about sort of standing out in tech. And David, I came across yourself just through your LinkedIn content, I think. So welcome, and I guess tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, and thank you. I think LinkedIn is probably where most people find me. I'm in various places, but LinkedIn is probably where I put the most content, and it's where I interact with most developers because of the way I've been operating in my career, which I'll talk about a little bit. So I've been a software developer. I graduated from university in 2000, so 23 years in this industry, held various roles, obviously, in that time, worked my way up from junior developer, senior developer, leading software development teams. And then in more recent years, I kind of moved into the recruitment side of things. I like to say I was tricked into recruitment.
I think
Uh,
I think everyone is. No one chooses. There's a reason there's not like a university degree in recruitment. I actually started in recruitment because I was called to interview at the tallest building in Reading. That was all I got. And now, 12 years later, I'm still recruiting.
Well, it was exactly so a very similar sort of thing. So I was well, I was actually leading a development team at the time, and a couple of the developers that were friends of mine were great at doing the job, not so great at the interview process, and they weren't getting any traction in terms of attention to move on and do better things. And they asked me for help, and I helped them, and that was successful. And one of them just said, why don't you do this as a company, as a business? And I thought, is that a job? Is that a thing? Could that be a thing? And then I ran away with that and thought about, could I do this? How could I do it? And that led me down a bunch of paths. And I started a website then, which became my company website, crushing.digital. And I threw up a website in a few minutes and kind of announced the service, saying I would help developers in this same way, not knowing how I was going to do this. And then kind of a recruitment agency, a well-known remote development agency, um, contacted me. Now I thought they were contacting me about, you know, my development skills and that sort of thing. But then it turned out they were more interested in this project I'd had going for about 2 or 3 months at the time. And they were like after someone to help developers present themselves for them. So I went there knowing this company, these developers were that I was working with knew of this company. They wanted to work there. So it was one of those exciting opportunities for me. And then when I got there, that kind of morphed into then, it started off as just me, but then building a recruitment team, leading a recruitment team. So we were hiring developers all over the world, mainly for US companies, but some international companies as well. But yeah, hiring lots of remote developers. And then during that time, and then the next few years, I did that for another two international agencies, building and leading recruitment teams. So I've interviewed thousands of software developers. I've hired hundreds of them, and these tended to be very senior software developers, and I saw the same mistakes over and over and over again. So I was kind of always being drawn back to this original idea of I can help these developers to stand out. But now I was hiring and almost didn't have the time to put into helping these people other than bits of feedback that you can give. But I saw the disparity then between how recruitment works, really works, and the way developers think it works and how they play the game. And there's a huge gap here. Um, so after a while, I decided to go back to my original idea because as a recruiter, recruiters tend to work more closely with the client. They're trying to serve a client. That's where their payday is. And I was always going to be on the side of the software developer because I am one. So I wanted to go back to that. And that's where I've ended up going back. And I wrote a book about it that turned into a course. And now I work. So I was writing this originally for very senior developers because those were the people I was working with and those were the people making the mistakes. But as ever, businesses pivot. The
Yeah.
people who were listening to me and paying attention were people trying to break into the industry, people in coding boot camps and things like that. So I started working more closely with the other end of the spectrum in terms of experience in software development. And that then led me to working and I run a bootcamp careers service for coding bootcamps. So I come in, run a 4-week course and help people. So I have the public side of it, the book and the course, and then I actually work directly with
Oh,
boot
nice.
camps. So I've had to adapt that for the juniors, but essentially it's exactly the same problem. And I'm now starting to go, okay, I should actually cater for everybody because that's where it originally came from. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I kind of fell into this, but it was kind of a mantra that kept coming back around and seeing the
Yeah.
same problems all the time.
I mean, in that kind of position as well, like you must have been there being like, if this thing that I want to do was a thing, I would use it. And then it's quite hard to leave it, isn't it? Being like, I need that thing that I was going to make. So,
Yeah,
and I guess
exactly.
the more that you're involved in those kind of conversations, the more you see that kind of gap. So, you kind of title it standing out in tech. I guess
Yeah.
why first of all, like why is that important for developers as a whole, and particularly sort of junior developers?
Yeah. So um, I always tell a similar story on this. If I was, because some of the agencies that I worked with were small but very popular. If I put out a job, I'd get thousands of applicants, and um, people then need to understand the way recruitment works, fundamentally, which we can talk about. But I quickly realised then that the the best developers rarely get the job. And when you've got thousands of people to process, you have to filter on certain things and you have to make best guesses and judgments because time is of the essence, which again we can talk about. So um, I quickly realized that recruiters, me included, you miss out on a lot of great developers just because those developers aren't presenting themselves in the right way. They aren't making the recruiter feel confident enough that they're the right person to spend more time with. So it was less about the standard things that I hear back from developers right now, where they go, I've been rejected from 400 job applications. I'm going to go and learn another algorithm, learn another language, learn another framework. And I was almost screaming in my head that going and doing those things won't help you. You need to learn to present what you've already got. And most people do the exact same thing and therefore they don't stand out. And if you're doing the same thing as everybody else and you're one of thousands of applicants, then you've got a one in a few thousand chance of getting an interview and getting the job. And that's why most people are getting rejected straight off the bat.
Yeah,
So standing out was the best way I could phrase it to say there's nothing actually wrong with how much you know, what you know. It's more to do with the real problem is more to do with how you present yourself.
yeah, for sure. And I think that's such a good point, and particularly prevalent at the moment with kind of how many layoffs there are and things like that. Like I see there's definitely something wrong, and I see a lot of this on LinkedIn with the way that the LinkedIn are processing the volume of applicants and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. But I barely see posts even for a kind of senior and quite niche roles that have less than 100 applicants on every single role, and it is a case of that it's a very low percentage of people that are even qualified for the role for in a lot of cases. But if you're getting dozens and dozens of applications that are, it is a case of you have to, like you said, filter in some way, and a lot of that is through quite sort of menial stuff like keywords and all of that,
Mm.
just to bring the sort of numbers down. So it is a really prevalent problem, and I think the more junior you go, I think the pool of applicants and pool of potential applicants is a lot higher, right?
Yes. So we used to have to wait, for once the graduates came out of a university course, they'd all get snapped up pretty quickly. And then once that pool of candidates is gone, you're waiting until the following year for the next batch. But with the launch of coding boot camps, we're getting developers thick and fast. We don't have to wait a year anymore. You might have to wait a week or a few days, and then there's a whole new batch coming out. And they all look the same. And this is the problem where I think a lot of those junior developers, but it also applies to seniors, they're all relying on something. So for juniors in boot camps, they're relying on that boot camp certificate, and senior developers relying on their experience. I've worked at these companies, but there's far more to it. Like, what did you actually do while you were there? And this is where I say to people in coding boot camps, nobody values your certificate. It doesn't mean anything to the industry. It doesn't mean anything to a recruiter. And a lot of people get upset when I say that. And I'm not saying that your coding bootcamp is not valuable. There's an immense amount of value that comes out of that bootcamp, depending on how much you applied yourself, obviously. But people have done all that hard work, and now you're waving a piece of paper. And that piece of paper doesn't have the impact that you think it does. What developers need to start doing is unpacking that value and presenting that value and showing how they've taken that knowledge and are applying it, instead of just waving the certificate. Everybody's waving the certificate, and therefore you all look the same.
And I think that's the thing as well. Like, say for example, you have 1 week 500 people graduate from boot camps. Like, they've
Mm.
all graduated, and the level. Say for example, it's one of these 12 week or kind of 3-4 month boot camps. The level of like ability for 500 people, say, that have all got the same certificate must be a huge range, from people that have just scraped through to people that have really grasped it, through to people that have done a lot before and were just kind of like adding to their knowledge. So I guess the ability level and competencies must be massively different between different sort of people that have got the same certificate.
Yeah, and I always ask developers, what do you think the employer is looking for when they are hiring someone who's fresh out of a coding bootcamp? If they're accepting that someone's brand new, a graduate of some variety, it doesn't have to be a coding bootcamp, but if they're accepting someone at that junior entry level, what are they expecting? And the social media nowadays would have you think that they're looking for someone who knows absolutely everything, and it's simply not the case. Senior developers don't know everything. I think junior developers nowadays know far more algorithms than I've ever known. And it's ridiculous that they're not even going to use these things in their day-to-day life. It's strange what the industry is actually doing to itself right now. But I say, when they're looking for an entry-level graduate, I always say to developers, "You're very expensive," and they go, "I am not. I'm a junior. I'm much cheaper than a senior." And I say, "Yes, but," and my next phrase that gets me into trouble is, "You're a burden." As a junior developer, and I go, "I'm going somewhere. Give me a second. I'm going somewhere." So when I hire a junior developer, and I've been leading small software development teams where we've gone, okay, we need to hire more people, and the company owner or management would say, we can't afford a senior, you can have a junior. Now, me as the development lead, I'd be thinking, I really can't afford a junior right now, because I can't afford for my small team to be reduced, because I'm going to have to take my senior developer, take them out of their day to day. So I get nothing from them. And I have to give them to you, the junior, sit there and help you for 8 hours a day. And that's the burden. And hand holding for 8 hours. So I pay the senior. My team as a whole is slower, and I'm paying the senior developer and the junior developer wage to get them up to speed. Yes, I know there's a long-term goal here, getting that person up to speed, but that's the problem is, certainly in startups and small companies, like, can we afford that slowdown right now?
Yeah, because like you said,
So I said,
I've never really thought about it that way. You are immediately paying more money to be a man down, right?
yeah, and it's a big choice. The smaller the development team, it's a big choice. So what are you looking for? Well, what am I looking for as that team leader? And I'd be looking for someone who doesn't require 8 hours of hand holding. If I can find someone who's more proactive, someone who's not just waiting, lots of developers, even senior developers go, I'm not learning that new technology. You pay me, I'll learn. I'm like, okay, but somebody else is going to do it. And then lots of people coming through boot camps, they're going, someone's taught me all of those things. And I go, great. Did you pay attention that day on that course? Have you applied it? Were you drunk? I don't
Yeah.
know. It could be anything going on. So I'm looking for someone who's not just taken that knowledge in, but has then taken it and is expanding on it and using that and applying it. That proactive element, because it's the only thing I've got. We can't filter on experience. So I filter on how proactive are you? Because if I can find the most proactive developers, and I've had great success with this, then I go, I don't need to give you my senior developer for 8 hours a day to handhold. I might need to give them to you for 2 hours a day for guidance. And then you'll be proactive about researching the problems and progressing on your own. So I'm looking for that spark and people think when I talk about passion that you've got to have a React tattoo on your face and you sing about React all day long or whatever the technology is that you're using. Passion for me is, how can you show that you actually want to do this? That's it, nothing more. And most people say, well, if I ask anyone, go, okay, what side projects have you got, or what are you doing outside to progress? How are you trying to break into this industry? What are you doing? And they say, I'm not working in my own time. I'll only learn if you pay me to learn. And I said, well, where's that passion that, this is where we get into people's LinkedIn profiles, and their about section is, I'm super passionate about tech. I'm so passionate about coding. I'm going to change the world with code. And yet you don't want to do anything to better yourself, to make it seem like you actually want to do this. And that's where everyone's saying the same things, and there's no way for me to filter. So how you present yourself on LinkedIn is paramount for me.
Yeah. And obviously, nothing against anyone that does have a React tattoo on their face, but a short of kind of doing
That'd be
like
cool.
how do people, I guess, just show that they are proactive? Apart, you can't just write down I am proactive. So
Correct.
how do you show that to either companies that you're already talking to, or I guess the hardest bit is getting the company to talk to in the first place, right? So how do
Yeah.
you show that you're a proactive person?
So the first thing is, when someone comes, and if you apply for a job, if someone's going to look at your profile, in fact, we need to rewind a little bit here, because the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to apply for a job. And like I said, when I put out a job, I'd get thousands of applicants. And then the real kicker comes in, that because it's recruiters looking, there will be other agencies involved. So we used to talk about this magic number of 3 days. I've got to get my candidates in front of that client in 3 days. Otherwise, that calendar of the client is going to be flooded with alternative developers, and we're not going to get paid. So they go through your LinkedIn profiles extremely quickly. I like to refer to this as Tinder for jobs. It's the swipe left, no, 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 and then swipe right for the odd one or two that present themselves in the right way. So you have to have that skeletal structure in place, and this gets a little bit controversial. And I talk about having, a banner image that tells me exactly what you do. Most people don't use a banner image on LinkedIn at all, but why waste the opportunity?
Yeah.
The headline's the really controversial bit, because most senior developers say, I don't want to pigeonhole myself, limit myself to a certain technology. So they just say software developer, programmer, computer engineer, whatever the term is that they're using. But I like to remind people that recruiters aren't searching for software engineer, software developer, programmer. Code wizard is one of my favorites. It's like no one's searching for this. You need to think about your customer and what they're trying to find. So a recruiter is often not technical. It's highly likely they're not going to be technical, but they've been given this buzzword bingo tick sheet of a job specification to try and find. And they go, okay, I'm looking for a Node, React, TypeScript, whatever developer. And your headline has that opportunity to say, even just front end and back end developers not enough. It's like front end developer specializing in React, or listing the technology. Confirm to the person you're in the right place. And then the about section, there is room for that I'm passionate phrase, but it doesn't come first. You need to be telling the person who's arriving at your profile, you're in the right place, keep reading. And this is what I do, and here's how here's how I can showcase I'm making more of this. I'm being proactive about this. But for coding juniors, then, a senior can rely on their experience section. It's just about what they've been doing in the last few years. Now, if you're a junior, you don't have anything in your experience section to write home about. Certainly nothing relevant to this industry, usually. So if you can't use your experience section, you have to leverage other parts. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to say, he was teaching people to pose for things. And he was like, if you don't have the legs, don't showcase the legs, or you don't strike that pose if it's not your strong point. You focus on your good bits. So this is where junior developers are downloading resume templates that are all focused on, the main part of that document is their experience. And the whole document pointing at the thing you don't have is a bad sign. So if you don't have the experience, you've got to rely on something else. And this is where your activity section really comes into play in LinkedIn. And I always say to people, LinkedIn is more important than any resume, because the recruiters always focus on LinkedIn first, because they can go through all these applicants quicker. It's always in the same format. Looking at different formats for every document you look at makes your head explode. So the activity then, I teach students to start documenting their journey. And it's like every day, if you're junior, you're trying to break into this industry, what are you doing to make that happen? How are you being proactive? And so if you're doing that, you should be coding every day or every other day and learning new things. And it's like, whenever you learn something, that's great. But how does the world know about that? And I teach people then to go, whenever you're at that point at the end of the day and you're about to commit code, an alarm bell should go off in your head. What did I write? What did I learn? What was the benefit? How would I do this differently? And you put that into a post. This post doesn't have to be long, because the recruiter's not going to read it. They're not technical. They don't read these things. But it's just about showing a vibrancy, showing volume of what they're doing and how proactive they're being in learning something. And this goes the same if anyone's learning off Udemy or any places like that. It's not really about waving the certificate. I completed that course. What was the value of that? It means to me, you watched a video for an hour. It's about how you're taking that and applying it and building on it. And this is where, as juniors go through their boot camp, they can start to document everything they're doing. And then in later weeks, they can look back at the code they wrote a month ago and refactor it and go, look how terrible I was, and talk about why they do things differently. You're showing that growth then. And this just goes to, like I say, flesh out your profile and show that you're a bit more proactive than everybody else. You don't have to be the best. You just have to be slightly more attractive. And if you can showcase that, when someone arrives at your profile, if the banner image looks right, the headline says exactly what you do, the about section says, oh, they're really interested in this subject, and then I can see them talking about it every day, you start to be more appealing. So there's more chance then of the recruiter swiping right than left. And that's when they'll go, okay, I'm willing to spend more time. I'm willing to look at supporting evidence like your GitHub profile or a portfolio website or things like that. The worst case scenario for a recruiter is you might say, I do multiple different technologies. Senior developers are more guilty of this. They might say, I can do front end and back end. They might say, I can do Java and Python. But if I offer you an interview and during that interview you say to me, I can do both, but I only want to focus on Python, today and I'm here for a Java role, or I'm here for a full stack role, and you tell me I'm kind of done with full stack, I just want to focus on the front end. Me, the recruiter, is screaming, going, I've only got so many interview slots. I need to get you off the call because it's a waste of time. I need to go and interview someone who does want this job. So what recruiters do, in my experience leading multiple teams, is they will hedge their bets and only interview the person that makes it absolutely clear, this is what I do, this is what I'm passionate about, and you can see evidence of it. Because I don't want to offer an interview to someone who might waste that time. So this means, do I miss out on great developers? Yes, all the time. But you would too if your time was limited and you're going to be judged on whether you provide a candidate that looks good enough to fit the role.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like I have been doing software development recruitment for like 10 odd years, and still I look at some people's profiles and I go, I don't know what you do. Because like you said, they're
Yes.
just software developer or software engineer, and it's two ends of the spectrum where you don't know. It's either they've written everything that they've ever touched, and I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I didn't even know those things went together, let alone that people could be that good in both, or they write nothing. And the thing that frustrates me the most is it's typically the senior developers that have just software engineer, software engineer, software
Yeah.
engineer are the ones on LinkedIn being like, why am I getting irrelevant jobs? I don't know what you do. Like, and what I don't want to do is message someone who isn't interested in my job. That's my thing as a senior recruiter who knows what they're doing. So I'll often send messages being like, I actually don't know what you want to work on. Like, here's a job. Like, let me know if this might be of interest to you. But the recruitment industry is also extremely, ironically, junior led, and you have a lot of companies that have junior recruiters working with them. It's a very common job coming out straight out of university, and you have a lot of people that
Yeah.
you will interact with that haven't been doing it very long. And if it's not clear to them what you're doing, they will literally, as you said, David, they'll literally just skip over your profile, because what they don't want to do is put a CV on either their manager's desk, like internally, and be like, I think this person's great, and them not be right. Or they don't want to send that over to a new client that they're trying to work with and then be wrong, because it just damages their credibility.
Yeah.
And if there's any doubt, they'll just leave it and just go and try and find someone else.
Yeah.
And like you said, the more clear people can be on their profiles, I think people almost worry about missing out on opportunities by like excluding stuff, or like you said, trying to include everything that you've ever touched just in case something comes up. But the clearer you can be about like what you're looking to work on, the easier it is for me to find people, because once I found people, the process is relatively easy in recruitment to go through. Here's a job that I think is really good for your skill set. We have a conversation, we agree on that, we put you forwards, and the company interviews you. If I don't know if you're relevant, you might even not get you probably just won't get the message, because I'll be unsure as to whether to message you, and I'll just be like, no, I'll just try and find someone else first. I might come back to them, but I'll try and find someone else first.
Yeah. It's something I call gaps. If you leave me unsure about anything, it's a gap. And if I have to email you to ask, do you do this or do you do this, or are you open to both, or if I have to ask, that it's certainly for me, working hiring developers all across the world, different time zones, and I'll have to email you. You might be at work, then you come back, and then you're out and you're drinking. It's going to take 24 hours at least before the email bounces back and forward, before we establish an answer. And if I'm talking about my magical 3 days, it's too long. So I'm likely to skip it. Only if I'm desperate do I do this. So I always talk about, if I, on the small side, if I got 1,000 applicants to my job, I'm going to go through and look at all of these people really quickly and see who fits the bill perfectly. Maybe get about 5 to 10 for an interview. So what happened, hopefully this resonates with junior developers out there applying to lots of jobs. I say to them then, okay, 990 of you are going to get rejected or in a holding pattern while I interview the other 10 because they looked better than you. And those 990 people usually are rejected by a recruiter who's not technical and didn't really go in depth in their profile. They just had a quick scan of the LinkedIn profile and said, there's not enough there to make me confident that you can do this and you want to do this.
It's
So,
literally like a guess who board, isn't it? You literally go
yeah,
through and you're just like, they're not wearing a hat. So no, 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 no. And then you have enough people left at the end that you can then qualify from there. So
yeah.
it's a brutal way of doing it. But the I guess like you said, the only way that you can really put change that to your benefit is to be clearer about kind of what you're doing to make it easier to be identified.
Yeah, and senior developers are the worst at this. They don't want to pigeonhole themselves, but it's a reminder to them that nobody's searching for software engineer. Put yourself in that situation as a random person. Go on LinkedIn and just type in software engineer and see how many people come up. Then what do you filter on? Because you've got a billion people. Now what? And you realize if that's all you're saying, the chances of you being picked are extremely remote. Now, I prefer people to say, I do this very specific one thing, but, real world, people can do multiple things. And what I say is, you in your headline, your about section, you make claims. You say, I can do this and this. And now the burden of proof is on you. Because if you say I can do Java and Python, and I can't see any Python repositories, I can't see any evidence you're doing Python, you don't talk about Python, it's just a claim. So when anyone says, I can do this and this and this, I go, great, I don't believe you, prove it. And that's when I go, what is the one piece of evidence? What is that thing that you can show me that proves you can do this job? And most of the time that's hidden, whether that's hidden on GitHub, hidden on their personal website, hidden somewhere that the recruiter is never going to see.
For sure. I guess outside of just trying to make yourself sort of stand out on LinkedIn and be clear about what you do, like what else can people go do to go further? So you talked about obviously posting about kind of what people are learning and obviously just being clear on their profile. Like I really like the idea of the LinkedIn banner. I think I don't know whether that's something that you've kind of come across fairly recently or if you've been doing that for a while, but I haven't seen anyone myself be like this is me on their LinkedIn banner. I think that would really stand out. And the other thing for me on LinkedIn that I am particularly, I guess, sort of like grabs my attention as a recruiter is a little bit of personality alongside the kind of thing. So I still remember my favorite one that I've seen was, don't know if you've seen Anchorman, but that he
Yep.
just goes, I code in JavaScript, or it might be JavaScript. I'm not sure if it's a soft J. And like that still sits with me now. And like I was on his profile and I was like, I'm gonna read more about this guy. Like so that really grabbed me.
Yeah, I think a bit of personality goes a long way. And this is where, when I tell people to document their journey, some people will just write posts. When I say just, that's a great thing to people writing posts. There's developers I know that have started it and they make videos. I'm not telling everyone to make videos, but some people are naturally that way. And if you can let a little bit of personality come out, even better, because usually in most technical interviews, there's a two-step process. The first interview is the sanity check. Are you normal? Are you going to be pleasant to work with, nice to talk to, those sorts of things. And then there's the technical side afterwards. By putting yourself out there, a bit of personality in some way gets you kind of over that first hurdle immediately. You're presenting yourself as that kind of person. So I do tell people to put personality into it, but they're only going to look for the personality if they like what they see. If you're definitely a match for the job. So the banner image is a new thing for me. I kind of talk about this in a way. It's like if you've got a shop, you and that's the way people need to think of themselves. Software developers need to think of themselves. Is you're a shop, and currently you're not putting your best products in the window, and then ideally we put a nice big pink neon sign going, "Hey, everyone, come in here." Without it, you're not going to get the traffic to the store, right? You've got to do the marketing. So I think a lot of great developers are out there. They're just not showcasing what they can do. So then the next thing is I said this to someone yesterday. because I was asking them, they said, oh, I'm not, I've done all the profile work and I'm applying for jobs, but I'm not hearing back. And I say, where are you applying? And I asked this question 10 times a day to different developers. And in the many, many years in this industry, I've never had a different response to LinkedIn, Indeed, Total Jobs, or one of those big job boards. And I go, if I'm working for a very small agency and I'm getting thousands of applicants, how many people do you think they're getting? And then there's the candidates applying, but whenever someone posts a job on this job board, every recruiter in the world sees it and bombards that company with emails saying, we've got developers, we've got developers. So you're one of many thousands. And then I say to them, okay, how are you that now trying to network, and how are you trying to job search by finding your own companies and applying direct? Because if you can apply direct, there's huge benefits to that. But then the networking side of it, and most developers I see right now are out there just saying, if they post on somebody else, comment on somebody else's post, it's simply nice post or thanks for posting. There's no value to this. So I teach people to start documenting their journey and encourage people to comment on their posts. But as you're about to submit your post, search for other people commenting, writing about the same subjects, and find popular posts. Can you join their post by adding value in a comment? Don't just say thanks for posting, but can you add value? But most importantly, if you're finding other people talking about the same subject as you, then they are hired by a company that hires developers just like you. So can you apply to that company? And you can take this strategy offline, and instead of just going to your local meetup and meeting lots of nice people, which is great, why not have a look at all those people and where they work and apply to those companies? Because those companies hire developers just like you. And this is where people don't seem to realize the work that recruiters do, because developers are saying, I'm going to put out a little bit of content, if that, to barely do a profile. I'm just hoping that some company is going to come along and take pity on me and hire me. And that's never happening. And the company is on the other side of it, sat there going, what can we do so that all the developers just want to work here and they come and apply? And that's not happening. And these two parties are sat on either side of a fence, not talking to each other. So when developers say, I don't like recruiters, and I've been that person, and I can say, honestly, hand on heart, never liked recruiters. Then I became a recruiter, and I see the problem. Recruiters exist because these two people won't talk to each other in the right way. So you have to value what they're doing. And this is where I say recruiters aren't just sat there waiting for a company to say, hey, we'd like to hire a developer. Can you help us? That's rarely the way. And you'll be able to confirm this, I hope.
Never.
That's rare.
maybe
Recruiters go to them and say, do you want a developer? Do you want a developer? Do you want a developer? Can I give you one? Can I please? And then eventually the door opens and we go, right?
So you've found my script.
But so this is the thing. Recruiters are opening the door for you. So if you really don't want to apply to them, you need to respect what the recruiter's doing, but you can open that door just as equally. And I think this is the case of, I'm not saying don't apply to jobs on LinkedIn and Indeed. I'm not saying don't use recruiters. I'm saying it's easy to click a button and apply on LinkedIn and Indeed. It takes a little bit more time to speak to a recruiter, explain to them exactly what you want and why you're a good fit for that role. And then put that iron in the fire as well. But then you can also write to these companies. And one of the strategies I suggest for people in boot camps and junior developers is to play a long-term approach. Contact the company and say, hey, I've seen your company. I've read the reviews on Glassdoor, or I've heard people talking about it, how you know them, why you like them. And go, I know I want to work there. But I appreciate you might not be open to hiring someone like me at this level right now. What do I need to show you in the time to come? What could I show you that you would then consider me a viable candidate? Most people will ignore you, but the odd one or two will reply, hey, you found a nice company with decent human beings. That's part one. But next, they're going to give you that checklist of those things that you can go away and work on and think, oh, actually, I did have that skill. I'm just not presenting it on my profile very well. Or that's the next thing for me to go and learn. Now you can go back to that company in 3 months, 6 months, whatever, or whenever you're ready and say, here's everything you said you wanted. And if they want it, chances are all of the other companies in the local area or the other companies that hire developers like you, that's what they want. And you're being more strategic about getting a job instead of just applying to 400 jobs a day, hearing nothing back and feeling like you're getting nowhere.
Yeah, I always go for there's got to be a certain number of volume to it, right? But like the less is more, like in terms of like the number of companies that you're applying to, and if you can do them, I mean, do that less better, like you've got a much better chance. For example, if I'm recruiting or one of my teams recruiting for a junior role, if they've got a person after person after person applying, but then they get whilst they're searching for this, and like you said, there is a certain amount of urgency to get people across to these companies and all that kind of stuff. If you just have someone pop up on your LinkedIn and just say, hi, like I applied for your job, like also wanted to drop you a connection and think I could be good because of this, like immediately you go into that swipe left pile and you just, is it swipe left or swipe right? What's good? It's been a while
Swipe
since
right.
I've been on Tinder, which
I've never been on, but swipe right, I believe.
So immediately you're in that swipe right pile and you're part of the conversation, and I will definitely check your profile, like compared to everyone else. And it's the same with companies. So if you apply to company X and it goes to their internal recruiter, if you message the recruiter, or even if it's quite clear that it would report into the development manager, just message the development manager on LinkedIn. Just be like, hi, just applied for your job. Like, I think would love to work there because of X, like, and I have this. And immediately that person will normally say to their recruiter, will forward your message along. And again, you become part of that pile and part of that screening process. So actually doing that with less companies is so much better than just applying and applying and applying to hundreds of companies with exactly the same result, which is normally nothing.
Absolutely. But you can employ numerous strategies. You can put the irons in the fire and do things. And applying on LinkedIn is rather easy. But and talking to recruiters takes a little bit more time. But now that's another asynchronous person who's off and running and working for you, and then you can be applying direct in all these things. I always think back to. Again, it was that developer that said, hey, you should do this as a job, the back at the start of when we were talking. It was when I hired that person, I was leading a very small development team, and we interviewed lots of graduates because that's what the pay rate that the company wanted to pay. So I interviewed so many graduates, and the HR person sat next to me, went in every interview, and every interview they come out and go, they seem great. What about them? And I'm like, no, because I knew it was going to slow down my team. It was going to be a problem, and I was already being, I was already under pressure to deliver the product. I didn't need my team going slower. And then I got into the interview with this one person, and he was very shy, and did the interview, and the HR person walked out and said, well, that's definitely a no. I was like, oh, that's a yes, because I could see the proactivity about they were one of those people that had been coding for many years on their own steam, and I could see what they were doing. They just didn't have the professional experience, and it wasn't really about the amount of years that they had doing these things. It was about the proactivity, about showing they were going to go somewhere and do it. And I hired that person, and it became very apparent very quickly that they were the best person on the team because we're more proactive about learning new things. And I had people with many years of experience, and they just leapfrogged them. To this day, still the best developer I know. And it was purely down to proactivity, nothing else.
Yeah, and literally like coming full circle to what you said at the start about kind of being proactive and that being the number one thing that the kind of people are looking for in a junior. If you can send that message and show that you are proactive and that's why you want to work there. Like, I think I get a lot of messages that are quite clearly cut and paste, which goes nowhere. But if someone has read it and been like, oh, I'm really interested in working in like this industry or with this particular technology, and you've clearly taken the time to read it, like I value that massively. So like at the actual manager receiving that message for a junior posting, like that's going to be huge and a huge tick point, because that's the hardest thing to find, right? They just want to find someone that can be proactive and can be trusted, because I guess it's that fine line between knowing that someone, like, obviously at a junior level they're going to need help, but you want someone that's going to have a problem, go away, try and solve it themselves, and then come back. You don't want someone spending an entire week working on it and banging their head against a brick wall, but
Correct.
you want someone that's going to go away and try it and come back to you and be like, I've tried this, like, what would you do next? And then go away and try again. And the only way you can prove that you will be like that, because you've not done it before, is doing that during your search and kind of showing that. And I think another point that you made was about companies that aren't necessarily hiring right now, particularly for like a junior level. If you see a company that you're interested in working in and it's the tech stack that you want, but I can't tell you how many times that we've been working a mid-level or a senior role, and they end up taking two juniors because they get to the point where they're like these people aren't, these seniors aren't going to add enough value for that budget. So what about if we take two juniors, get them to work together? Like, it happens a lot. So it's still always worth reaching out.
How often do you hear this as well? And I bet this is, I know the answer. It's when a recruiter goes to a company and says, are you hiring? The answer is no. But if you've got someone interesting, we would take a look.
Yeah, get that.
Almost every company is hiring if the right person presents themselves in the right way.
Yeah, for sure. There's always, like, even us, there's X amount of experience and like knowledge within the industry that we would have to be like, I mean, that's a no-brainer. So if you are, it might be, and they'll have a particular like list of what would be a hire for them, like right now, that they can say no to. And it might be, for some companies, it might be lives locally and like round the corner so that they can be part of the team that we're trying to build. Or it might just be that if they had experience with React Native, we really want to move towards that. So if someone like that came along, otherwise we're not hiring. So there's always something that companies will hire. So it's still worth doing that outreach if you see a company that's interesting.
And you know, again, going back to the start, because you asked, you know, why call the book and the course and the things like that, why call it Standing Out in Tech? And so to stand out in tech is to do the things that everybody else won't do. And if you're trying to break into software development and you're, you know, pick whatever tech stack you're about to try and get into, go and search for the other developers that are doing that and look at their profiles. The main thing is their LinkedIn profile will suck. You probably won't be able to get to their GitHub. You won't see any supporting evidence. They aren't documenting their journey. There's no evidence to prove that they're doing anything. And you'll quickly start to think they all look the same. They all look the same. And that's why everything I'm teaching everyone how to do is to do the things that everybody else won't do. And that's from filling out your profiles to how you network to how you apply for jobs, the whole thing. And if when I say these things to you, you come up with a very quick solution, like apply on LinkedIn. And then the other classic was someone only yesterday when I was saying apply directly to some of these companies, they went, okay, I write a different email to every single person. I went, no, you can write a template, just make it, but it, you know, maybe tweak it for why you want to work there, but write the template. Then I'll just use ChatGPT for that. And like, it's nothing against using ChatGPT, but everyone's always looking for the generic, fastest way to do something. And there are times to be generic, and there's a time to put a little stamp of you onto it. And this is where everybody else won't do this, which is why standing out in tech is really easy if you know how.
Yeah, I read so much from people like Gary V and all these salespeople, because that's essentially what you're doing is selling yourself. And it like the biggest thing is personalization at scale, right? And it's like for example, on a job application, like if you're sending follow-up emails or like sending LinkedIn connections, the about you is not going to change because you're you. Whereas like the reason why you want to work at that company should. And it might be the same job at 20 different companies. So the about you and why you want to work in that job doesn't change. But again, the company should be different because you're probably applying to startups, companies that are remote, companies that are local, like all of those things. Like, and you just tweak that bit, and you can leave the rest the same. And that little change, rather than just being like, "Dear Sir" or "Madam," which I get all the time, which I'm not sure why. Like that, I don't know. Probably says more about me than other people, but it like just taking the time to be like, "Hi, so and so. Sure, you've worked at the X company for 5 years. Must be a great company. You're sure you're doing great work in the fintech space, or like whatever it is," and then add in your template like about you. Like that's all you need to do. It's not about writing from scratch and long email and an essay and cover letters and all that kind of stuff, but just taking the time to be like, this is why I want to work for you as a person, you as a company, or a bit of both is the real difference.
Exactly. And on a lighter note, you mentioned Gary V there. The name of my company came from when I read Crush It 10 years ago, or whatever it was now. I was working as a CTO then, and I knew I wanted to start something. And the person sat behind me, their desktop background was Gary V on stage, and it was like, stop focusing on dumb stuff. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm gone. I'm going to do this as a career. But there's a video he's got, years old now, and it's so relevant to developers and how they apply to things. The video is called Hard Work and Patience. And about 2/3 of the way through the video, and he's talking about starting a company, but it's relevant to how people are applying for jobs, coming out of creating boot camps and things like that. And he says, every day is going to go by and you're going to look for that one move, that miracle algorithm, something that's going to change your outcome. And I'm going to keep putting in the work. And the years are going to go by, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. And you're going to be still hoping and praying, and I'm going to be executing. You keep playing the short game and I'll keep playing the long game. And that's exactly what I'm telling students to do, is go, you're looking for a miracle. You're looking for someone to come and take pity on you. You're looking for someone to look past your absence of evidence on your LinkedIn profile, your GitHub profile, your portfolio, or any of your other supporting evidence. You're looking for them to not care that there's nothing to indicate what you do or why you want to do it, and just give you a chance. And it's never going to happen. And you're just hitting apply on LinkedIn because it's really, really easy. And you're sending out your email messages written by ChatGPT. Whereas I think you, instead of just pressing a button and hoping and not getting anywhere, every day you're back to square one. You need to be growing your strategy, building your network in an organic, authentic way about the tech you want to be found for, and finding jobs that, finding companies that might be interested in you. And every day you're getting closer and closer. Stop playing the long game, like Gary Vee said.
For sure. Is it interesting because I'm reading, I don't know if you've read it, Atomic Habits at the moment, and it talks about obviously the 1% changes that you make to kind of continually improve, and use this analogy of like an ice cube sat on a table, and all of the effort that you put in as you kind of like heat up the room around it 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, and you don't see any change in the ice cube. It doesn't melt, but as soon as it gets to that point where it goes past like freezing point and it starts to melt, like that's the stored effort, then kind of cascading over. And I think it's the same with anything, right? Like you have to be improving and doing the right things consistently to do that. But if you start getting that 1% or that bit better now and continue to improve on that, rather than just staying where you are and hoping for the best, and like you said, just kind of cascading as wide a net as possible. If you just improve, then day by day it will get easier.
So the interesting thing, and I fundamentally agree with everything you're saying there, is I started documenting my journey for creating this a while back, and friends-ish contacted me very quickly to say, stop doing this. It's really embarrassing what you're doing. Like, stop putting these videos out and this content and all that sort of stuff. And then I got that job at the company that they all wanted to work for. And then everyone turned around and went, whoa, like, how did this happen? Like, how did you get a job there? And they found my content. And I said, well, I got it from doing all the things you told me not to do. Everyone wants you to stay in your lane and do nothing. And don't get me wrong, I'm talking to coding boot camps, I'm talking to senior developers. So all my content was based around senior developers because that's what I know. And that's what I've been hiring. That's what I am. But senior developers don't listen to a word I say. I don't know why. It's hard to tell senior developers that they're bad at presenting themselves. And they go, well, I got the job. I always have to remind senior developers, everyone I've hired, I wrote your CV for you. I wrote your resume because it was so terrible I couldn't send it to clients. I can't think of a single developer I haven't written their resume for them.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's terrible. So we had this thing in one of the companies where we said, to train the recruitment team, let's go and find the 10 best developers we have, look at their profiles and emulate those people. So I did this. I knew the 10 people I wanted to pick, found their profiles, and then we started to analyze. The only commonality I could find is that all of their profiles suck. They were hired in spite of it, and it was only because we were desperate about a certain technology or that were referred by a friend or something like that. So the vast majority of the hires we made were the people who presented themselves in the best way. Now, does that mean we missed out on a lot of great developers? Yeah. But that's the game. And this is why I tell developers who say negative things about recruiters, stop hating recruiters, learn to play the game. You'll have far more success if you just learn how a recruiter works and what they want. They're your customer at the end of the day. No business model, no startup model that I've ever heard of says, please ignore your customer and just keep going. Your customer is the recruiter or an employer. And if you're not writing content, if you're not presenting yourself in a way that's for them, most developers are writing it for other developers. They don't care about you. They're not going to employ you. So why are you putting that in the window? You need to be putting the things that's going to get your customer excited, the recruiter.
For sure. And just to be clear, David has not been kidnapped or paid to say those kind words about recruiters, but I do agree wholeheartedly with everything that you say. So I'm conscious that we've been going for nearly an hour. So I feel like I could talk about this literally all day, as you obviously do for a living.
I do, yeah.
So I'll wrap up there. I guess if anyone wants to reach out either about your course or just things in general, like where's the best place to get in contact with you?
So the website is crushing.digital. Obviously, you can find me, all the links to my social profiles, LinkedIn, TikTok, that sort of thing there. And my email address is david@crushing.digital. But yeah, if anyone wants any help or wants to talk to me, please reach out.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, David. Really enjoyed that.
One of the things I was going to say is for your listeners, if they'd like a discount code for my products as well, I can happily give you that, and maybe you could let anyone have that if they want it.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. If you send that over to me, I'll share that with the post. And anyone that is, thank you for listening. And again, we've got a bunch of more of these episodes lined up. But if anyone's got any particular guests or particular topics that they'd like to hear about, email us at podcast@thedeveloperlink.io. And any questions outside of this, it's chris@thedeveloperlink.io. Thanks again, David. Really enjoyed that. And see everyone else next time.
Thank you, Chris. Really enjoyed it.